I have no idea what we are doing. I don't know what am I supposed to say, what to do, what not to do. It's kind of like not given for me. So I guess that's it. We are supposed to discuss true, false, and not given. So anyways, it's another video by OSI's online IELTS. My name is Anish Patel, that much I know, and I'm the academic head here at OSI's Anand branch. So as you already know by now, we are going to discuss the most difficult question type that students face in the IELTS reading test. It has been known to give students headaches, to give them nightmares, to make them sweat, and it has a very bad image due to its difficulty and due to the confusion, especially between the false and the not given. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my own strategies with you. Hopefully they work out for you as they have done well for me. I have used them in my test as well, and I managed to score a band 9 in the IELTS reading. So without wasting any time, let's just focus on the basics first. Now, as you can see on the screen, this is how the questions on the paper will look like. There will be a normal statement asking, do the following statements agree with the information given in the whichever passage that is. In the boxes, whichever boxes they are, on your answer sheet, write true, false, and not given. So the instructions here are very, very clear and very, very straightforward. But when you actually solve these questions, it becomes very nasty. So the true, it says if the statement agrees with the information, false, it says if it contradicts, and not given if there is no information on this. So like I said before, false and not given are going to be the most confusing one. But before we proceed, what I would like to make you guys aware of and request you to keep in mind is that you don't need to waste a lot of time if you're stuck on some sort of confusion in the real test. There are 60 minutes allowed for the reading exam, and you have 40 questions to solve. So if you do the math real quick, it takes about 1 minute 20 seconds or so that you should spend on each question. So if you're taking more time than that, then just leave the question and just write an answer which you are the most sure about, and it's like making an educated guess, and then you can just move on to the next question. So anyways, let's move on to the next slide and take a look at our passage. There it is. So the passage over here, as you can see, has 3 different paragraphs. It has 3 statements written underneath it, and you have to find out whether those statements are true, false, or not given. So let's go with the first one over here. The first step you should do is read the statement. Don't go to the passage until you have read and understood what the statement means. So the first statement is, the flood peaks at almost 1500 cubic meters every 8 years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this sentence into an interrogative sentence. So basically making it a question sentence. So the question sentence would look something like this. Does the flood peak at almost 1500 cubic meters every 8 years? So now you know what part of the sentence you need to focus on. Does it peak? Is it at 1500? And does it happen every 8 years? So you already have your keywords, and if there is a number in a statement like we have here, which is 1500, the numbers are always important because they help you locate the exact sentence in the passage. So let's read the first paragraph. I've already located it for you. It starts from the second sentence, which says, spring snow from as far away as Wyoming would melt and swell the Colorado River to a flow that averaged around 1500 cubic meters a second. So over here, the 1500 cubic meters is the measurement of the flow of the river. It does not talk about the flood or anything yet. So let's move on and read the next sentence. It says, every 8 years or so, that figure rose to almost 3000 cubic meters. So now we have all our keywords, we have all our information. So we know that the answer cannot be not given. So we need to ask ourselves, does the flood peak at almost 1500? Over here the statement says no, it peaks at almost 3000, which is double. So that means your answer is false. It contradicts the information mentioned in the passage. So let's do the second sentence over here. It says contribution of sediments delivered by tributaries has little impact. And if we convert it into a question, it looks like this. Does the contribution of sediments delivered by tributaries have little impact? So does it have little impact? Does it have a huge impact? Or does it have no impact at all? So now that we know what the key part of the question is, we have to focus on whether or not it has impact. And let's see in the paragraph here. So I've already highlighted two statements in this paragraph. So basically the whole paragraph contains information regarding this question. So let's read that. However, in the 4 decades since the building of Glen Canyon Dam, just upstream of the Grand Canyon, the only sediment it has collected has come from tiny, undammed tributaries. Even that has not been much use, as those tributaries are not powerful enough to distribute the sediment in an ecologically valuable way. So we know that this paragraph does talk about the sediment, and it also mentions that it comes from tributaries. But anywhere in the paragraph there is no talk about whether or not it has an impact on the Grand Canyon. It mentions that it has come from tiny, undammed tributaries. It says clearly here that the only sediment it has collected has come from tiny, undammed tributaries. But it doesn't mention the quantity of the sediment, the effect of the sediment. It just says that it has collected some sediment. So let's get back to our question. Does the contribution of sediments delivered by tributaries have little impact? So by reading this paragraph, I can't really say whether it has it or not. So I'm just gonna say it's not given. So this is why you convert these statements into yes or no questions. Because when you convert them into yes or no questions, what you're supposed to do is you go back to the passage, you read whatever information there is, and then you ask yourself that question. If you are able to answer that question, yes or no, or true or false, then you have your answer. But if you're still confused after reading the paragraph whether or not how to answer that question, then it is very, very likely that your answer is still not given. So anyways, let's move on to the third statement over here. Now this one says, decreasing number of chubs is always caused by introducing of trout since mid 20th century. So over here, the word trout may be new for you. Trout is a species of fish, same as chubs is another species that lives in water. So let's convert this statement into a question again. Has introducing of trout always caused decreasing number of chubs since mid 20th century? So over here, the key aspect of the question is trout responsible for decreasing number of chubs? And is it responsible for that since the mid 20th century? So we are going to focus on the third paragraph over here. And I've already highlighted a couple of statements. So we're going to read from this. The humpback chub, for example, thrived in the rust-red waters of the Colorado. Recently though, its population has crashed. At first sight, it looked as if the reason was that the chub were being eaten by trout introduced for sport fishing in the mid 20th century. So let's focus on something else for a bit. An impatient student, what he or she would do is that they would just read this much and be satisfied. They would just assume that all their keywords are matching, all the conditions are matching, even the context is matching over here, and they will just quickly write false and move on to the next question. But we are good students. We follow instructions, we are patient, we keep our cool. So what I suggest all my students to do is, whenever you locate a keyword in a sentence, what you do is you read 3 different sentences. You read the sentence that is above the keywords, the sentence that is after the keywords as well. So a total of 3 sentences that gives you a whole picture, the whole background story, and which enables you to make an informed choice. So let's get back to the slide. Over here, the last statement, which is the one that is after our keywords, says, but trout and chub coexisted until the Glen Canyon Dam was built. So something else is going on. So now we know that whatever they said in the previous sentence, which we thought, not us, but which some of the impatient students might have thought that the answer is in that sentence, the same answer is being contradicted over here. So what the passage is saying, that it was believed that trout was eating all the chub, but then trout and chub have coexisted before as well, before the dam was built. So the decreasing number of chubs may be due to some different reason, which is why it says over here, so something else is going on. So over here, the question that we framed was blaming the trout for being responsible for the chubs. So is the trout responsible for decreasing number of chubs? No, it is not. Something else is going on. So your answer is false. So those were the 3 statements. Now we're going to do 3 more, and in that we are going to speed things up and see how we can apply these tactics in the real test with so little time. So let's move on to the next slide. The passage here is relatively smaller compared to the first one. It is still the same topic about flood and everything. 2 paragraphs, again 3 different statements. Let's start with the 4th one over here. It seemed that the artificial flood in 1996 had achieved success partly at the very beginning. I've already converted it into a question, as you can read. Did artificial flood in 96 achieve success partly at the very beginning? So did it achieve success in the beginning, and was it part success, are the key areas that we need to focus. So in the first paragraph, I have already highlighted some sentences, and we'll start reading from, unfortunately, it is easier said than done. Floods were sent down the Grand Canyon in 96 and the results were mixed. So you can see that the sentence is passive. It says floods were sent down. That indicates that someone sent those floods. That means it's talking about artificial floods. So let's continue. In 1996, the flood was allowed to go on too long. To start with, it all seemed well. The flood waters built up sandbanks and infused the river with sediment. Eventually, however, the continued flow washed out most of the sediment out of the canyon. That means initially there was some success. The flood that was artificial, it did manage to build up sandbanks. It did manage to infuse the river with sediment. So there was part success. But eventually it says there is a contradicting linker over here as well. However, the continued flow washed out that sediment out of the canyon. That means the success was only in the beginning, and in the end it was not so much. So did the artificial flood achieve success partly at the very beginning? Yes, it did. So your answer is true. So true questions are always very easy. Let's move on to the next one. It says, in fact, the yield of artificial flood water is smaller than an average natural flood at present. So this one is very straightforward. If you look at the question, it asks, is the yield of artificial flood water smaller than the average natural flood at present? So we are supposed to find out where they talk about yield of the flood water. So yield is basically the output of the flood water, how much water that comes during the flood. So the artificial flood water, is it larger than the natural flood? Let's find out. In the second paragraph, it says, at less than 1200 cubic meters a second, this orchestrated flood is smaller than even an average spring flood, let alone one of the mightier deluges from the past. So we have our statement over here. It says 1200 cubic meters a second. That is the yield value of a flood. A flood. The next part says this orchestrated flood. The word orchestrated means that something was arranged That's why I'm going to assume that it is the synonym of artificial over here. So they are indeed talking about the yield of artificial flood, which is smaller than even an average spring flood. So yes, is the yield of artificial flood water smaller? Yes, it is. Is it smaller than average natural flood? Yes, again, your answer is again true. And with the last one, let's look at the statement here. It says, mighty floods drove fast moving flows with clean and high quality water. And if you convert it into a question, it becomes, did mighty floods drove fast moving flows with clean and high quality water? So did they create flows with clean and high quality water, or did they not? That would be our question. So now we have already read most of the passage, so I'll just mention this quick thing which I am aware that most of the people know. These answers, true, false, not given, and yes, no, not given answers are always going to be in sequence. So if you find the first answer, you just continue reading and you will eventually come across the second, third, and fourth and fifth one. So over here we only have a couple of statements left. Let's read them real quick. It says, those glorious inundations, they are still talking about the floods. Those glorious inundations moved massive quantities of sediment through the Grand Canyon, wiping the slate dry and making a muddy mess of silt and muck that would make modern river rafters cringe. So, does it mention anything about clean and high quality water? I don't think so. Does it mention that it created fast moving flows with high quality and clean water? No, it doesn't. So, are you able to answer this question? Did mighty floods drove fast moving flows with clean and high quality water? No, I can't answer that. Hence, I'm gonna say the answer is not given in the last one. So, those were the set of questions. I hope these strategies helped you. If you did not understand them quite yet, make sure you watch the video again and follow step by step. It would be a good idea to pause it and read the paragraph. Take your time, understand the things, but don't take too much time in the real test, because then you will skip out on the other questions which might be simpler than these ones. So hopefully these strategies work out with you, and remember one thing, practice is the best thing to do. More practice you do, the more strategies you will be able to deploy, the more strategies you will be able to formulate on your own as well. So anyways, thank you for watching today's video. If you liked it, give us a like, share it with some of your friends, mention in the comments if you have any feedback or anything. And again, thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you.